Millie Bobby Brown, 21 years old, and her husband, Jake Bongiovi, who is 23, have welcomed a new child via adoption. And the internet has a lot of opinions. And honestly, some of the comments just make me a little sick to my stomach. We got to go over some of this today because I did a video maybe last year or maybe even earlier this year about, it must have been last year, because when Millie Bobby Brown got married to Jake Bongiovi, there were a lot of comments about how she was too young to get married. And I think they're adorable. I obviously don't know anything about their personal life behind what we see online, but they welcomed a child through adoption. This is their announcement. It says, "This summer, we welcomed our sweet baby girl through adoption. We are beyond excited to embark on this beautiful next chapter of parenthood in both peace and privacy." It's got a little picture of a tree. And then at the end it says, "And then there were three, love, Millie and Jake Bongiovi." I think this is sweet because there are a lot of kids in the adoption system who obviously came from broken homes or maybe something tragic happened with their biological parents and they need a home. And somebody like Millie Bobby Brown and Jake Bongiovi, they obviously have a lot of resources. These are rich celebrities. Now, just because you're rich doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to provide the healthiest, most loving home in the world. However, when you have a lot of resources as parents, you are obviously much more likely to provide a good home for kids. Somebody like Angelina Jolie, for example, she's adopted however many kids. I mean, these kids are living a pretty good life, regardless of whatever happened with Brad Pitt, their father, adopted father, whatever. But when you have a lot of resources and a lot of money, it is definitely easier to adopt than somebody who's like, lower middle class, for example. I think it's sweet that they adopted. We don't know why they adopted. I highly doubt it's because they are struggling with infertility, being so young. They seem to be fairly healthy. Now, it's not our business if they are struggling with infertility, but if I had to guess, I don't think they adopted because they're struggling with infertility. If I had to guess, obviously pure speculation, I would guess that they adopted because it's something that they wanted to do to give an underprivileged child a better life. And I think that is a good thing. I think that's a sweet thing. I don't think that this is going to be the only child they're going to have. Again, pure speculation. But if I had to put money on it, I would venture to bet and to guess that Millie and Jake are going to have more children in the future. And they're probably going to have biological children as well. And they may even adopt more. And I don't think there's anything wrong with adopting. You see a lot of comments that are like, they should have had biological children. It's their duty. It's their obligation to give birth to their own children and continue their bloodline. That's a good question. Is it our obligation and duty to continue our bloodline? Personally, I think the answer is yes. However, I don't think it's mutually exclusive from also adopting. I don't think that you can't adopt because you must produce your own biological children. But, I know my take is a little bit, it would be considered radical today, but I do think that it is our duty and our obligation to bring biological children into the world. That's why our ancestors gave us life. Our great-great-grandparents and grandparents and parents gave us life because it is our duty to continue our bloodline. Obviously, it's a different thing if you're struggling with infertility. It's not like, you have failed at something if you're struggling with some sort of medical issue where you can't have biological children. But if you're able, I do believe that you should. However, I don't believe it means you shouldn't adopt. I think it's a nice thing to see young couples like this adopt. But the comment section is, I think, totally off when I see some of this stuff on Twitter because people are shocked at the fact that a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old are becoming parents. They're actually more than shocked. They're disgusted by it, which just reflects this sort of culture that we live in where people despise parenthood, particularly young parenthood. And people are convinced that your brain doesn't fully develop unless you're at least 25, 27 years old. So you shouldn't be having kids if you're younger than that. You can vote when you're 18. You can serve in the military when you're 18. You can drink alcohol when you're 21 legally. If we're going to infantilize young adults, then you better infantilize them across the board. Now, I know that some 21-year-olds are obviously more immature than others, but I doubt that somebody like Millie and Jake would make this kind of decision, and especially wouldn't make this kind of decision with the support of their families if they weren't ready. Because I remember pretty clearly, I shared this in my video that I did about them and their marriage when they were newlyweds. Jon Bongiovi, Jake's father, said in an interview that he feels like they are really ready to take this step and get married, even though they're young. And it seems like they have full support and encouragement from their families. So I don't think this is a decision that they would take lightly. And I don't think that this is something they would do unless they were ready. So I do think it's cute that they're adopting. Of course, there are a lot of questions about whether Millie is doing this because she doesn't want to ruin her body. And this is obviously a question that we ask with a lot of celebrities who do surrogacy, for example. Now, there is a big difference between adoption and surrogacy. You can watch my previous video on that. I even did an interview explaining, especially systematically, morally, why adoption and surrogacy are different. I'm not going to get into it on this video because I could talk about it for a long time. But this is different than surrogacy. There are a lot of differences that come into play when it's surrogacy versus adoption. And we don't know whether Millie is doing this because she doesn't want to ruin her body. We don't know. So I think for me, and I know may not be a very popular take, but for me, with the limited information that we have, I think that this is a really sweet thing to see young parents growing their family. And I also take issue with the claim that you are too young to have children in your early 20s. And I've said this many times on my channel, so don't twist my words, but I'm not saying that you must have children in your early 20s, but I disagree with the claim that everyone is patently too young to have children when you're in your early 20s. I don't necessarily believe that to be true. And I think that the constant bashing of people having kids when they're between 20 to 25 or even 20 to 30 is just another reason why our birth replacement rate is so low. People hate seeing young parents, and that's really disturbing to me. Again, I'm not saying that everyone has to get married when they're 21 or 25 and have kids right away. No, it's more important to marry the right person than it is to get married young. Your age is not nearly as important of a factor as it is to find the right person and to really be ready. However, if you find the right person and you know you want to be a mom, there's nothing wrong with starting early if you're ready. And I think what I really take issue with is a lot of people just bashing her for being like, you're only 21, you're ruining your life by having a child. That's a horrible thing to say. I am not in support of that. And that's one of the reasons why culturally we're so against just children in general, because people have believed this nonsense that having a baby ruins your life. It does not ruin your life. It changes your life. But I think that every single life is worth celebrating, especially children, babies. And I think if we change the way that we approached this topic, we wouldn't have such an issue with having more kids. And I don't think we would have such a low birth replacement rate. I mean, this is absolutely a cultural issue. Is it also an economic issue? Yes, you can certainly say that is a factor, but so is our cultural approach to thinking about pregnancy and motherhood. Women are still convinced that when you have a child, your whole life is ruined. And that's a depraved way to think about bringing life into the world. Adoption is good. There are a lot of children out there who need a better home. So I'm excited for Millie and Jake and their little baby girl. I'm excited to see how their family grows. I would put money on it. You can screenshot this. You can put a timestamp on this. I'm sure they're going to have more children, and I'm sure that they're going to have biological children as well. And I look forward to seeing that. Let me know what you guys think. Are they too young? Is 21 and 23 too young to have kids? Or is it cute that they're adopting? Is it wrong that they're adopting? Should they have had a biological child first? Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. We'll see you on the next one.